Hi, this is Christa at The Secret Yarnery. Today we're making this C2C join as you go gingham blanket. What is so great about this blanket in particular is it literally looks like a piece of gingham fabric. We're working 2 strands at a time and just building 1 block at a time and building onto that block as we grow our blanket. So it's super easy to do once you know your C2C. The border is super cute, just kind of tie it all together with a cute little border. So we're going to be doing all of this, and I'll put the timestamps of when we start the border in the description box below. So if you're coming back to do the border or you just want to do the border on any other blanket, this border would work great on any granny square kind of blanket where there's sets of 3 stitches, or any C2C blanket as well. So I'll put that in the description box below as well as on the screen. For my blanket, I just went through what I had in my own Yarnscape and grabbed all of it. This is what is left. I used 19 of these skeins all together. I used a mix. I used Favorite, I used Savor, and I used Savor 100. I think this is a Savor. So I just used everything that I had and I just mixed it as I went along. So it'll work great as a stash buster if you have a whole bunch of yarn and you can just mix it up like I did. If you are ordering your yarn, I used a total of 19 100-gram skeins of acrylic. If you're ordering yarn specifically to make this gingham blanket, you will need 2 packs of each of your colors and 4 packs of your main color. So 4 packs of your background, my white, and 2 packs of each color. If you're ordering from a store where you can just pick your skeins, you'll need 6 skeins of your pink and 6 skeins of your green and 12 of your white. I'm also going to be using a 9mm crochet hook, and you will also need a stitch marker and perhaps a darning needle for sewing in your ends later. So let's get started. To plan your colors, you can just Google search for 1 centimeter graph paper and just print yourself off a sheet, or it's also going to be included in the written pattern down below, but that will just be the actual 9 by 13 worksheet, so it'll be quite a bit larger grid than this is. My blanket is 9 squares wide and 13 squares tall. So I'm starting with my pink color. I'm just going to draw my line through 9 squares. So there's 6 and there is 9. And that is going to be my first line across. And then I'm going to skip one. I'm going to leave 1 line white, and into the 3rd box up, I'm going to do it with green, leaving 1 line white, going across in my pink, and I'm just going to alternate this going all the way up until I have 13 rows completed. There's my 13th row across, and I like to begin and end in the same color, kind of to frame the blanket. So I'm going to do the same thing going across and now going up my 13 rows. So starting with pink, then green, and always leaving 1 empty row of white. So using this chart, whatever colors of marker are in that square is what we are going to be using for our yarn, and we're always going to be using 2 strands of yarn. So our first square is going to be 2 strands of pink. Our second square is going to be white and pink. The next one, green and pink, white and pink, pink and pink, white and pink, green and pink, white and pink, pink and pink. Then following this up, the next row, we're going to start with pink and white, white and white, green and white, white and white, pink and white, green and white, pink and white. If our marker is going all the way across, every single block of that row is going to have that color. If it's empty, every single block of the white rows is going to have white. So let's get started making this little cute block right here. When you're working with 2 strands at a time, it's easiest to take 2 skeins and work from the center of both skeins. If you are nearing the end of your blanket and you just have 1 skein left, you can also work from the outside strand together with the inside strand, just with that 1 last skein of yarn. we're going to start by making our first block. So pick one of your solid colors for your first block and just make a slip knot using both strands of your yarn. Leaving a long enough tail to sew in with a needle and put that onto your hook. So we're going to start by chaining 6. 1, 2, 3. I pinch that third chain, and then 4, 5, and 6. Now wrapping your yarn, we're going to go into that stitch where we pinched it, our third chain from the start, or the 4th chain back from our hook. To count your stitches, you don't count your knot and you do not count what is on your hook. You just count these V's in between. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is right underneath my hook. We're going to go into the 3rd stitch. We want to have 2 of those loops on our hook, so 4 strands of yarn. So wrap your yarn and into the 3rd chain or the 4th chain from your hook. 2 of those strands of the stitch on your hook, and make 1 double crochet. Now into each of these chains, 1 and 2, we're going to be making a double crochet into each. So I just go into the very bottom part of that chain, just on top of this bottom little loop right here, and that's where I'll be doing my 2 double crochets. So 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 chains. There it is. And this is as awful as it's going to be. It's not going to be this awful ever again, so don't worry about it. Don't think you're going to be doing this for the whole blanket. And then our last double crochet into that very last chain. If you can't get the two strands on top of your hook, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. It just looks a little fancier if you can. There's our last double crochet. So we have our chain 3 on one side and 3 double crochets. This is the building block for C to C. So there's our first one, and now just let it hang down, just kind of ignore it, and we're going to do that again. So we're going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, pinch it, 1, 2, and 3. Just like that. Now in right where we're pinching it, the 4th chain down, wrap your yarn and you're going to make your first double crochet just into the bottom part of that chain. There's our double crochet and into the next chain. So I just look at these bottom loops here. There's 1 loop, 2 loops, and 3. We've gone into the 3rd. So now we're going to do double crochet and double crochet. The bottom part of that next chain, 1 double crochet, and into the last chain, 1 double crochet. So we're always doing sets of 3 double crochets. There we go. And now this is what your C to C looks like. We're going to flip up our first block. So this block that's hanging down, they look like 2 little purses. Flip up your first. And now we're going to look for this chain 3 space right at the top, this big space, and that is where we're going to slip stitch. So put your hook in and slip stitch like that. So now it looks like that. We've connected it. And chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. Now into the same chain 3 space, we're going to do our 3 double crochets. We did our chain 3 and now 3 double crochets, all into that same space. So this is nice and easy. You're not working into anything other than a big space, so it starts to go quite quickly. If I'm working too fast for you, you can click on the gear down below and slow me down, or speed me up if I'm too slow for you. Or just pause the video and catch up. So this is the end of round 2, and we're right here at the end. So now we're going to do another block. So we're going to start that with a chain 6. So 1, 2, 3, pinch it, 1, 2, and 3. Wrap your yarn, double crochet right into where you are pinching it, or the 4th chain down from your hook. Just working into the bottom of that chain. 1 double crochet, and now same thing for all of our building blocks will be like this. 1 double crochet into each chain. So 1 double crochet here and the 3rd one right there. So wrap your yarn into the next chain, 1 double crochet, and into that very last chain. It can get a little small and not look like anything. You can think you ran out of a stitch, but it's just this little guy right there. That's where we want to work our hook. So our last double crochet. And now again, we're going to flip up our work. So if we're just letting it sit there, it looks like this. We want to take the work we finished and flip it up like that. Now you can see we have our chain 3 space waiting for our slip stitch. So go ahead and slip stitch right into that chain 3 space. Chain 3 to start your block. And 3 double crochets into the chain 3 space. So now this is how we're going to be growing our blanket. This will be the repeat. Slip stitch, chain 3 and 3 double crochets. So into the chain 3 space, we're going to slip stitch, chain 3 and 3 double crochets. We're going to build a block and kind of work a staircase going back up. So slip stitch into the chain 3 space, chain 3, 2, 3, and 3 double crochets into that same space. 1, 2, and 3. Just like that. So we've done 3 rows now. We want to do 4 rows and then we're going to start decreasing. For the gingham blanket, you can do any multiple of 2. So you can make them small. You can just do 2 rows, or you can do 4 rows, or you can do 6 rows. Just make sure it is a multiple of 2. So we're at the end of our row and we're going to start a new block. So chain 6, 1, 2, 3, pinch, 1, 2, 3. So that is your chain 6. Wrap your yarn and right where you're pinching or into the 4th chain from your hook, 1 double crochet. There's 1. Into the next chain, 1 double crochet. And into that little tiny hiding chain, 1 double crochet. So now it looks like this. I'm going to turn up your work or flip up your work like that. And now we'll have our staircase on the top, and now we're going to start working back up our staircase. So into the next chain 3 space, we are going to slip stitch and build our block. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and 3 double crochets into that space. 1, 2, and 3. Slip stitch to the next stair or the next block. Slip stitch into the chain 3 space. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and 3 double crochets into that space. 1, 2. And if I'm going too fast, just slow down the video by clicking that gear down below, or pause the video and get caught up. Slip stitch into the next chain 3 space, the last stair of our row. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and 3 double crochets into that chain 3 space. 1, 2, and 3. So that's our 4 rows, and we can count our rows just by our blocks. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 blocks going up the side. Now we're just going to turn our work the old-fashioned way, and we're going to slip stitch along that side to get to our chain 3 space. So we're just going to slip stitch 1 into every stitch. So I'm even going to go straight into that very first stitch. I'm going to slip stitch right into here, just to get the yarn nice and working on its way. Into the next stitch, slip stitch, and into the next stitch, slip stitch, and into the space, slip stitch. There we go. So you get a nice straight corner. Now we can kind of rotate our work a little bit and chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Wrap your yarn, and now we're going to build our blocks going all the way along our staircase again, but we will stop when we get right here. So we're going to build 1, 2, and 3 blocks. So 3 double crochets into that first space. 1, 2, and 3. And slip stitch into the next chain 3 space, just to join up that block. Chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. 3 double crochet into the same space. Slip stitch into the next chain 3 space to join up that block. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and 3 double crochet into that space. 1, 2, and 3. Slip stitch into the next chain 3 space to join up that block. And now we've done 4 blocks on this row. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So chain 1 and turn your work. Now into this very first double crochet right here, we're going to make a slip stitch. We're going to slip stitch all the way up to our chain 3 space. So we're going to go here, 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 and then into the chain 3 space. So slip stitch, slip stitch, slip stitch, and slip stitch into the chain 3 space. So we're ready to rotate our work a little bit and do our row. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Wrap your yarn, 3 double crochets into that space. 1, 2, and 3. Slip stitch into the next chain 3 space. Chain 3 again, 1, 2, 3. And 3 double crochets into that space. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to slip stitch to join up that block and finish that row. Chain 1, turn your work, and now we're going to slip stitch into each of these double crochets going all the way up and also into our chain 3 space. So slip stitch into the first double crochet, into the second, into the third, and into the chain 3 space. Oh, and look, we have our last block to do. So how quick is it to decrease? So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, 3 double crochets into that chain 3 space. 1, 2, and 3. Slip stitch into the chain 3 space. And chain 1 to secure your work. Now we're finished with this square, so you can just cut your yarn, leaving a long enough tail to sew in with a needle later. I leave quite a long tail, probably about 5 or 6 inches, just because I don't want to fight my yarn later. And pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down to secure. So there is your first block. And now we're going to look at our chart and see what color we're going to be doing next. So now we're going to be joining on to our very first block. And before I do that, I'm just going to mark the top of my blanket. So I'm just going to put a contrasting stitch marker just on the one side, just on this top side. So not through any stitches, I'm just laying it across. So not on this side, just on the top side, anywhere at all, just so I know that this is the top of my blanket. So we have done our pink and pink, so we can kind of X that off if that helps you keep track of where you are. And our next block is going to be pink and white. So grab your next 2 colors and make a slip knot, leaving a long enough tail to sew in with a needle later. And put that onto your hook and shrink it down. So I'm going to join building onto my row. So I'm going to just put my hook straight in to this chain 3 space, slip stitch to join that yarn, and we're going to build our first block. So we're going to chain 6, 1, 2, 3, pinch, 1, 2, 3, 1 double crochet into the 4th chain right where you're pinching, and 1 double crochet into each chain going down. So 3 double crochets, 1 into each chain, same as we were doing before. And this last chain is a little bit fussy, so don't worry if you only get 1 of those strands on your hook, it's fine. There we go. And now we're going to slip stitch into this space to join, or you can go into the stitch. Try to go into that space, if you can see right underneath that slip stitch. Try to go into there. If it's difficult, you can work into the space. It's not the end of the world. And that will hook down your first block. And now chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. So it looks like that. Now we're going to slip stitch this down into, you can either go into the space or go into the stitch. I try to go into the stitch just so it's a little bit less obvious, but if you're new and this is your first kind of big blanket, just go ahead and go into the space. It won't make that much of a difference. So slip stitch right into that, either into the space or into the stitch, and chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Turn your work, and now we're going to do our 3 double crochets right into that space around our chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Slip stitch into the chain 3 space and build your next block. So chain 3 and 3 double crochets into that chain 3 space, like so. Now we're at the end of our blanket. So we're going to chain 6 and build a new block. So 1, 2, 3, pinch, 1, 2, 3, and 3 double crochets into each chain starting on the 4th chain or the chain that you're pinching. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to flip up our work, all of our work. It'll get bigger, but you're always going to just flip it up. Slip stitch into that chain 3 space to join up that new block. And now you're going to work up our staircase. So we're going to build a block into our chain 3 space, join it, and build our block. So chain 3 and 3 double crochet into that same space. And slip stitch to our chain 3 space to join the next chain 3 space, like that. Chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and 3 double crochets into that same space. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to join in between our next block, and I'm going to try to go into that stitch. Or you can also go into the space if it is tricky for you. I'm just going to try to push my hook in and slip stitch. Just like that. So now it looks like this. We've done our 3rd row. Now we'll do our 4th row. So we're going to start that with a chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to slip stitch right to the top. We're right into this corner. We want it to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to slip stitch right here into that top chain. Just pushing your hook in and slip stitch to pin it down. Chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. Turn your work. And 3 double crochets into the very first chain 3 space. And we're going to work back up our staircase the same as we did before. So pause the video, work up your staircase, and I will meet you at the end of this row. So now we've done our 4 blocks along this edge. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now we're going to decrease and just finish off this square. So turn your work and slip stitch right into that very same stitch just to get a nice crisp corner, and 1 slip stitch into each stitch, working your way to that chain 3 space. There's my chain 3, so slip stitch into the chain 3 space. I'm going to spin your work around, and now we're going to build our staircase going back up this side. So chain 3, and 3 double crochets into the space, slip stitch, chain 3, working your way back up. So pause the video, work your way up the staircase, and I'll meet you when we are joining up into this last chain 3 space. Slip stitch to the chain 3 space. Now I chain 1 just to get a little bit of distance, and turn your work. Now we're going to slip stitch all along this side until we can slip stitch into our chain 3 space. There's our first slip stitch, 1, 2, 3 slip stitches, and our 4th slip stitch is right into that chain 3 space. Chain 3 to start our new block. And now 3 double crochets, slip stitch to join, chain 3, 3 double crochets, and I'll meet you when we're slip stitching to the last block. So slip stitch into that last chain 3 space, chain 1, turn your work, and now slip stitch all along here. It's the same as we did for our very first block. We're finishing the exact same. So slip stitch 4 times. There's 2, here's 3, and there is 4. Turn your work a little bit, rotate it, chain 3, and finish your last block. 2, 3. 3 double crochets into that space, and slip stitch into this chain 3 space to finish off your block. There's our slip stitch, chain 1 to secure your yarn. Cut your yarn, leaving a long enough tail to sew in with a needle. Pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down. So there is our second square built and joined, and now we're going to be working on our third. So the joining method is exactly the same. I'll put a little timestamp up here so you can go back and just watch this section over and over. Pretty much it's just this joining part right here that's new. The rest of it is the exact same as doing the pink. So you'll get the hang of it, just keep following along. So we've done our pink and pink, we have done our white and pink. The next square we're going to be doing is green and pink. So go ahead and get your green and pink yarn ready. Slip knot and onto your hook. We're going to be joining into this bottom corner right into that stitch. So slip stitch with both strands of yarn onto your hook and put your hook right into that stitch. This is how we're going to be joining every block if we're just joining to one side. And you're just going to keep building your row all the way along until you have finished this entire row. So pause the video and I'll meet you when we're ready to start the second row. The first block for our second row will be white and pink. And keep track of that stitch marker. We would just want to make sure that we're always starting our block with our stitch marker facing up. So slip stitch and put it on your hook. And we're going to start building our block right into this nice open space that's waiting for us. Just right there, top of the chain 3, also where we joined our square. We're going to be working right into the same spot to start our next block. So go ahead and put your hook in, slip stitch, and chain 6. 1, 2, 3, pinch, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to do the same thing, just building our block. So 1 double crochet right where you're pinching into the 4th chain from the hook, and 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 chains. Just building a block like we always did. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. So slip stitch into that stitch or into the space, whatever is easier for you or whatever you prefer. And just go ahead and keep building this block. This is the same as we did joining on the side, except we're joining 1 row up. One bit that might kind of trip you up a smudge is when we're joining this, when we're finishing off our last block, it's our chain 3 and we just have to pin it down. So just pin it down to anywhere in that corner. And this block might look different than mine, just depending on what side you started your square on. So just pin it down any spot that you can and just finish off that block. So it'll look like that. Chain 3, pin it down, chain 3, and then turn your work. So pause the video and I'll meet you when we are starting our next square. So your blanket will look like this now. We're ready to start joining in the corner, which is going to be super awesome. It's my favorite part of this blanket because there's no more chain 6 and building a block on the side. So no more working into chains, which I really, really love. It goes so much quicker. So if you just tick off where you are, I finished this square right here. I'm just doing a small pillowcase for this tutorial, but if you are working on the bigger one, definitely just tick off that block and then look what you're going to be doing next, which is white and white, white and white. So 2 strands of white for the next block. Make sure your stitch marker is still facing up, and I'm just going to move it to the next block up so I know when I'm starting my next row where I need to start. So our next row will be starting way up here. And I just like to keep track of that. It can be a bit, you can kind of start flipping it around and getting confused. So that's why I just move my stitch marker up so I know where I'm going to be building on next. Get your white yarn ready. So slip knot and put it on your hook. We're going to be joining our next block or starting our next block right in the corner. And we're always going to be starting our blocks in the corner if we have a corner. So right into this nice little spot. And you can see it's waiting for you. We've already worked into it on both sides. We're going to work into it again. So put your hook in and slip stitch to join your new yarn. And now chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to slip stitch right into this space or into that stitch. I just go right into that little chain one space I made, or little chain one stitch I made, just right beside. If that's hard, you can always just go into the space. So push your hook straight in, wiggle some of that yarn onto your hook, and slip stitch. And chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to work into this chain 3 space that we just made and put in 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. So we have our first block and we just have to attach it. So now we're going to slip stitch on this side, either into the big space or into the stitch. I'm going to try to go into that stitch and slip stitch. And chain 3 again. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to kind of turn my work a smudge. And I'm going to slip stitch right into the next space or this stitch right on top of that space. Wiggle your hook. Slip stitch and chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. So now it looks like that. Turn your work, and we're going to build right into that chain 3 space. So 3 double crochets into the chain 3 space that we just built. 1, 2, and 3. And slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. So this all looks normal. This is what we're used to doing. So slip stitch and chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Wrap your yarn and 3 double crochets into that chain 3 space. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to be slip stitching either into this stitch or into the space, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go into the stitch, pushing my hook in, slip stitch to join. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we'll pin this one down. I'm going to go in right after that knot, just underneath, and I'm even going to go over my tail, a tiny little smudge, and slip stitch. You of course can go into the spaces. If you've been going into the spaces before, just keep going into your spaces. And slip stitch, chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Now it looks like this. And turn your work. Now we're going to build back up along our staircase, the same as we always have. So 3 double crochets into the space, slip stitch into the space to join, chain 3 and 3 double crochets into the space. Slip stitch to join, and 3 double crochets into this last space. Now you can slip stitch into the space or into that stitch, whichever you have been doing before. I'm going to go into the stitch and slip stitch. Chain 3 again, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to slip stitch that down right into the top, into the corner of that last block. Just the corner of it. So push your hook in and slip stitch. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. It looks like this. Now we're going to turn our work. And we're going to work back up our staircase. So 3 double crochets and slip stitch, and then work your way up, and I'll meet you when you get to your last block. And make sure you have worked into your very last space. Make sure that you have you're finishing at the same height as your last block. So make sure you have 4 blocks before you start your decrease. And you can just wiggle your fingers in to count, or make sure that it lines up with your next block. And now we're just going to slip stitch right in to where we joined before. So just into that nice little space right here. So slip stitch and turn your work. Now we're going to slip stitch all along this side. One slip stitch into each stitch, and we're going to start our decrease. So this is the same as we have done for all of our blocks. So just keep going, decreasing until this block is finished. So now this block is finished. Don't worry if right after you've done it, if there's like big holes and it's kind of wobbly on one side, it'll totally even out and everything will be looking nice and crisp like this once you have joined on all sides. So don't panic, don't think it's like terrible if it's like all kind of weird and not square. And like over here, it's all going to even out and become nice and square and flat and joined once you have built on every side. I also tuck all of my tails into the back side, so it's another easy way of telling the front and back. So if there's a stitch marker, I make all the tails go on the back side. So keep joining along this row until your row is finished. Join again the next block right by your stitch marker up and work along that row, and then it's time to do the border. A corner. I'm just going to put my hook straight in to this corner here, just how we would normally be joining a square if we were starting a new row. So just get your hook in and 2 strands of your white yarn for the border. So I'm going to join my new yarn into this corner space right here. You can use any corner space, doesn't matter. I'm just chose this pink one. So put your hook in and take a loop of your yarn, leaving about a 6-inch tail. You want it long enough to sew in easily later. So put that loop, and I'm using 2 strands of the white, same as we did for the rest of our blanket. Pull it through and slip stitch with both strands to join. So we're joining our yarn in a different way now because we want it to look like that as we go around, so it looks like a single crochet. Drop your tail and chain 2. 1 and 2. Now jumping straight into the next space, we're going to do a single crochet. So hook in and 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1, 2, into the next space, single crochet. And we're going to do this all the way along the edge of the blanket. Single crochet into the space and chain 2 to get to the next space. So that still keeps our stitches even, gives us 3 stitches. Single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the space, chain 2, single crochet into the space, chain 2. Keep going like this all the way along the side until you reach your corner. When you reach your corners, you're just going to go right into the top of that stitch, right in the corner, to make your new corner. So push your hook in and single crochet, chain 2, and into the very same stitch, the very same spot, 1 more single crochet. So hook in and single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the next spot, chain 2. Now we can kind of go back. So this is what your corner looks like. Very cute, and your next round will go right into that corner space right there. So we're going to keep going around doing a single crochet into each space with a chain 2 to get to the next space. And corners, get single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet all into the same corner spot. So keep working your way around your blanket, and I'll meet you when we get back to where we joined. When you get to your corner, just put your hook straight back where you started into the same spot and single crochet, chain 2. And now we're going to slip stitch to join. I'm just going to slip stitch right into the center of that V. I'm just going to like pull it up a smudge, just like that. I'm going to put my hook in and slip stitch. And don't worry if yours is all scooped up and looking too tight, that will just help your blanket keep its shape in the future. Now we're going to slip stitch over right into that next space. So just slip stitch over, that's where we want to be. We want to start from that space. And chain 3. 1, 2, 3. This is going to count as our first double crochet to give us some height. Wrap your yarn and 2 more double crochets into that space. 1 and 2. And now all the way along this side, we're going to be putting 3 double crochets into each of these spaces. So just super quick and easy, 3 double crochets into each space all the way along. Like that. So pause the video, 3 double crochets into each space, and I will meet you when we get to our corner. When you reach your corner space, do 2 double crochets into that corner chain 2 that you made. So 1 and 2. Chain 2, 1 and 2. And now making sure it's in the same spot, 2 more double crochets into that same corner space. That's going to be your new corner, 1 and 2. Just like that. And now keep going, 3 double crochets into each space all along the sides. Your corners will be 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. So keep going like that, and I will meet you when you get back to where we started. So that's finished it off, and now we're going to slip stitch to join. We're doing one more round on our border, so we don't have to do any fancy joining. We can just push our hook straight into the top of that chain 3 and slip stitch to join. So straight in and slip stitch. Chain 1 to secure your yarn. Cut your yarn, leaving a long enough tail to sew in with a needle later. Pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down. So that finishes the white for our border. Now you can pick whichever color you want to use for the next round, either your green or your pink or whatever colors you are using for yours. Put your hook into that corner space, loop of yarn on your hook, leaving a long enough tail to be able to sew in, and bring it through and slip stitch with all of that yarn to join. Now you're going to drop your tail and chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. So that counts as our first single crochet and a chain 3. Find your sets of 3 in the row below, and we're just going to single crochet in between those stitches. Just like that. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and single crochet into the next space. So we're just redoing these spaces between our stitches. We're doing it again in green, so that each of them are going to line up. We're kind of making little chiclets going all the way along, and we're chaining 3, 1, 2, 3, because we don't need to hold in our blanket anymore. Now we can just let it be a nice little border. So into the next space, or after the next 3 double crochets, single crochet, 1, 2, 3, and single crochet into the space between the next 3 double crochets. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, single crochet into the space between the next 3 double crochets. So we're going to keep going around doing this all the way along. I'll meet you when we get to our first corner. So when you get to your corner, I've done my chain 3 and single crochet into the corner space. Chain 3 again, 1, 2, 3. Rotate your work a smudge and single crochet into the same spot. So we're just doing the same for our corners as we did for the first round of white, except we're doing chain 3s instead. And don't worry about these 2 stitches and the chain 3, don't worry about any of it. Just keep going along. Chain 3, single crochet right after those 2 double crochets. Just keep an eye on that. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and single crochet in between the spaces of each set of 3 double crochets all the way along. For your corner, you'll do single crochet, chain 3, and single crochet into the same corner spot. So keep going around like that all the way around your blanket, and I'll meet you when you get back to where you joined. Into the corner where we started, I did my chain 3, so single crochet into that corner space, chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to slip stitch right into the center of that V where we joined. I'm just going to push my hook in and slip stitch to join, just like that. Chain 1 and turn your work into your corner space. Single crochet and 3 treble crochets into that corner space. So wrap your yarn twice and make 3 treble crochets. There's 1, 2, and 3. Now single crochet right beside. So put your hook in, get that yarn right along your work so it's pulled down, and make 1 single crochet. And that'll kind of pull all those stitches down and give you a nice cute little bauble there on the corner. Jump straight over into the next space, and you're going to do single crochet, treble crochet, and single crochet. So that gives you cute little baubles, super simple, super easy, and they'll be on the right side of your blanket because we're working into the back. So into each of these chain 3 spaces, single crochet, treble crochet, single crochet, and nothing into your stitch, everything is into the spaces. So I did my single, my treble, and your single. So when you're doing your single after that treble, get that yarn right back down beside, like right onto your chain, and do your single nice and tight down at the bottom. And then skip straight over to do your next single crochet, treble crochet, and single crochet into the next space. So you just pinch it down and do your single crochet to finish that space off. So it looks like this from the side you're working on, and it looks like that from the other side. How cute, right? So keep going along this side. I'll meet you when you get to your corner. When you get to your corner, you're going to do single crochet, 3 trebles, and 1 single crochet all into that corner space. So just hop straight in and single crochet, wrap your yarn twice, and 3 treble crochets. So that's going to be, each corner is going to be exactly like this. There's my second treble crochet. And my third. And now tip all that work down, get your yarn straight along your chain, and finish it off with your single crochet. So that'll pin all of those stitches down and give you a nice little bauble on the other side. So now keep going around, doing the same thing all the way around, and I'll meet you when you get back to where we joined. It's not as hard as you think, so if you haven't done it before, totally give it a try. You want to cut your yarn, giving yourself, I don't know, 6 or 7 inches of yarn. And instead of joining, you're just gonna pull that yarn straight up and through that stitch, just like that, and thread your needle. And now where we're going to join into this first real stitch here, our single crochet, I'm going to put my needle straight as I would my hook, just underneath both strands of that V, and pull it through. And I'm going to keep an eye on where my yarn is coming from. So I'm keeping an eye on this hole right here. That is where I'm going to go back into next. So I want to keep an eye on this. So keep pulling it to join it up, and keep an eye on that hole where the yarn came from. You don't want it super tight, you still want it to look a bit like a stitch. Now you're going to go back down where your yarn came from, that spot you were keeping an eye on, and just thread your yarn back down through. And see, that gives us a little V that looks just like any of the other stitches. So that is why it's called invisible join. And now you're just going to weave in your tail. Now I'll show you how to sew in your ends real quick. So to sew in your ends, we have 2 different kinds, one that ends on the side and one that ends in the corner. So I'll show you just a quick little way of sewing all of those in. Don't panic that it is a lot of work, it's actually pretty quick. And I don't like my ends, so that's a statement. So I'm just thread your needle and work your way back along underneath all of these stitches here, under those 3 double crochets. Kind of snug it. You want it to kind of blend in. You don't want to pull too tight, but you also don't want it loose. And then go under one of these loops of the same color yarn, just to pin it on that one side, and then go back the other direction. So that'll pretty much hold your end right there. If you want to be really sure, you could just do that again. So grab a loop of your yarn, same matching colors, or same colors, and then go back down under those same stitches. So that's 3 times. That is going to stay for sure, and it's not going to stretch out. And then just snip it off. And that is it for your blanket. It's complete. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, don't forget to give the thumbs up down below and share the video with someone else who you think might want to make one of these blankets. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great day and stay hooked.